everyone, Opal here with Girl of Steel Musings, bringing you my review of Supergirl Season 3, Episode 2, Triggers. Overall, this is one of my favorite episodes to date. It reminds me a lot of one of my favorite Supergirl Season 1 episodes, which is The Girl Who Has Everything, Episode 13. I'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Triggers, and then list off the questions I was left with by the end. I'm going to shy away from doing a rating based on a number here, and I'll be doing letter grades instead going forward. So if we go back to the last episode, which is The Girl of Steel, I would say it's a solid B+. You're probably wondering, listening to this, why I would attribute an 8.5 numerical rating to a B+. Well, the truth is, I was kind of rushed with doing that review, and I think I was a little generous with the rating. Going back, I realized I was rather annoyed with how little Mon-El mattered to the rest of the characters, considering he was said to be family. And I was rather annoyed with the fact that no one sympathized with Kara's grief besides Jean. It was kind of sloppy character writing and kind of hindered the plot. I still think it's a strong episode, but just not as good as I initially thought it was. Let's move on to the meat of the episode today, and that's my Triggers review. I'm going to start by talking about the strengths of this episode. One of the things I'm really impressed by in the last two episodes is the emotional gravity. Supergirl is the only Arrowverse show that has some real repercussions from its finale to the premiere, and the cliffhanger was not resolved by the end of the first episode. I was surprised that the emotional weight of the premiere was carried forward so well. From the very beginning, we see Kara's loneliness in stark contrast to Maggie and Alex and Ruby and Sam. We see several hints of her missing her lost love. The way she wakes up and longingly looks at the empty spot beside her, to her sitting alone in a deserted kitchen poking at a gloopy, disastrous mess of oatmeal, to when the sequence finishes off with the annotated Romeo and Juliet book. Again, Mon-El isn't physically present, but we feel his loss and his importance in Kara's life. Amidst his loneliness, they introduce the villain Sai to great effect. From the first moment she and Supergirl go head-to-head, we know that Sai will be a formidable force. I don't want to go into too much detail with the hallucinations, as I will be doing a breakdown of them later, but they perfectly showed off the inner turmoil contained within Kara for the last 6 months. We see Kara repeat the fact that she feels broken, both in the premiere and in this episode. And she feels broken because she defeated the evildoer in the finale like she was supposed to, but it came at a great personal cost. However, what's not intuitively obvious here is where her fear stems from. For Kara, one of the most powerful beings in the world, I actually believe her fear is powerlessness. We are taken back to the moment where she first feels this pang of powerlessness. And that's when she was placed in the pod in Krypton in the first hallucination. And that feeling of powerlessness is echoed both in the elevator or even in the end of the episode when she connects and makes the realization of what her fear is really about. I really want to pause here and commend Supergirl for depicting mental health issues like panic attacks and PTSD in such a positive light. It really goes forward a step to destigmatize and normalize these issues. No one talks down to Kara, no one labels her as a victim or tells her that she's weak. Instead, people like Alex and Wynn strive to create a safe space in which she can talk and receive support. Kara also had some really moving scenes with Alex in this episode, both in the apartment where Alex reassures her that her real strength comes from being Kara and that she will always have Alex to rely on, and later in the episode when she talks Kara down as she finally breaks about her powerlessness of not knowing what exactly happened with Mon-El, with her worst fear being that he indeed perished in the pod that she placed him in. I was disappointed by the interactions they'd had in the episode previous, Kara and Alex, I mean. So this was a refreshing change, and ultimately it exceeded my expectations. It reminded me a lot of the Season 1 dynamic these two sisters had that I really loved. I also loved Kara's interactions with most of the other characters, Wynn especially. The Wynn and Kara friendship is one of my favorites, and I felt it had been a little forgotten in favor of developing other relationships, so I was happy to see Kara confiding in him. Jean and James took a little bit of a backseat in this episode, but they were here for Kara when she needed it. Overall, the cast of characters went back to feeling like a family instead of rather disparate entities, which is how I felt back in season 2 and even in the premiere. The acting was another strong point for me. I can't give Melissa Benoist enough praise for her amazing portrayal of a grief-stricken Kara Danvers this season. She's absolutely riveting in every scene. She's just like performing on a whole nother level and outperforming anyone on DC TV. No one can touch the performance she gave in this episode, both in emotional scenes, the action sequences, and in the brief moments of levity. It's not easy standing next to a performance like Melissa's and hold your own, and I felt both Yael Goldblatt and Kyler Lee did that to great effect, both as an antagonistic entity and a supportive force respectively. We really went back to season 1 Alex this episode, and Kyler played that excellently. She gave a much softer performance and showed a side of Alex we haven't seen in a while. Yael Goldblatt, meanwhile, wasn't given a lot to work with, but she was confident in that somewhat kooky Gail Marsh she was given. She played off Melissa's performance well and presented a force that was challenging to overcome. Odette Annable again shines as Sam. It's really a credit to Odette's charisma that she's got me on her side within the scope of 2 episodes. Even within a B storyline that I didn't like, I really felt for her, especially when she was speaking to Ruby's teacher. We don't really talk about cinematography and sound design in relation to CW shows, but we need to talk about it here. It's amazing how the lighting and how the shots are framed to echo Kara's state of mind. In the opening sequences with Danvers and Sam and Ruby, they were flushed in yellow-golden sunlight with close angles, while Kara's was flushed with blue and gray light with slightly skewed angles to show the feeling of emptiness Kara feels. Later, the camera work on the hallucination episodes and panic attacks coupled with the effects were excellent. Melissa Benoist actually posted a behind the scenes showing off the fact that she had used an ultra-focused camera on herself to capture her brilliant performance. The hallucination sequence was by far one of the best moments of the episode for me. The entity in the pod was very well done with the heavy breathing overlaid over the sounds of destruction around it. The sound design again was used purposely to tell the story. The score on the soundtrack was also used to great effect, coming in at the right moments to highlight all the emotional highs and lows. Let's get into some of the things I didn't like. The B storylines. All of the B storylines fell flat to me. In fact, I was counting the seconds until they were over so we could go back into the main storyline with Kara, Alex, and Sai. Because the episode focused so much around the Danvers sisters, Danvers fell to the sidelines. Therefore, I felt the kids' talk they had was a bit shoehorned into the episode and deserved more time and consideration. Also, does anyone find it strange that the idea of starting a family has never come up for these two? They've been together for over a year and are engaged, and it seems a stretch to me to believe they've never talked about having kids. Next is the Sam and Ruby storyline. I was so enchanted by the chemistry these two characters had in the premiere that I was sorely disappointed by how it was handled. Ruby came off very unlikable when she purposely sought out danger for attention. An easy fix to this would have been to have Ruby to find herself in the crossfire instead and realize that the circumstances of being a superhero is not as glamorous as she thinks it is. Also thought that Sam was not absentee. She was heavily involved with Ruby, so why did Ruby feel like Sam wasn't giving her enough time? Lastly, the Catco storyline. This was my least favorite storyline in the episode. Lena Luthor didn't have the presence of Cat Grant, and at times behaved horribly unprofessional. Her snap from warm and supportive to cold and brash was perhaps supposed to show her latent Luthor tendencies, but it wasn't supported by the performance. I could have lived with Lena's behavior had it not been the apologies exchanged at the end of the episode, which took away from the conflict and had me wondering why they had Lena take that turn only to backtrack. Besides the comedic elements in the beginning, the Catco storyline was not enjoyable. The development between James and Lena also felt minimal, and the development with Sam being introduced as the acting CEO of L Corp felt like a throwaway. They could have reserved it for another episode. I compared this episode to the Black Mercy episode in the beginning, and I just want to briefly compare the Catco storyline in that episode to this one. In the Season 1 episode, it added comedy to a very dark and emotional episode, with Jean pretending to be Kara while answering Cat Grant's every beck and call. This storyline in the current episode only was there to add more drama, and up the stakes for Kara, only to take back the stakes it raised. I think I felt bitterness towards these storylines because I don't feel like they were compelling as the main plot, and I wish they devoted more time to the hallucinations or the Danvers sisters. Another thing I was disappointed by was the villain's backstory and the comic book elements. As a DC Comics aficionado, I was looking forward to their handling of Sai, who, as I mentioned in my breakdown of the episode teaser, was a sympathetic villain. Yet she's made really cartoony in this episode. Yale delivered a great performance with what she had, and because she has great stage presence, I kind of forgave it, but really wasn't compelled by the backstory of her being a meta-human that just snapped and started robbing banks. I also know they depower Martian Manhunter quite a bit, but he lost a fight with Sai a little too easily, considering he's considered one of the best psychics in the DC universe. Nitpicks, I know, but it's a few things that kind of bugged me. So overall, I'm giving this episode an A-. It would have gotten an A, but the B storylines kind of dragged it down for me. Season 3 has had such great momentum, I really feel like I'm going to be handing out some A+s soon. Now on to the questions that were raised for me in this episode. So we'll be going to Mars in the next episode, and I'm really curious to see what we'll see on Mars. I'm really excited about some of the things that it could entail. When we heard that the show was shooting on a Martian set this summer, the majority of us assumed that it was flashbacks. So there was a lot of surprise and excitement to hear that it's in present time. We know we'll see Mirren Jones, Space Dad's dad, but could we also get some hints about his arch nemesis from the comics, Malphayek? What role will Maggie's dad play? Will this serve to push Alex and Maggie apart? With Sam as the acting CEO of L Corp, what will her interactions with Kara look like? Will we see another hint of her abilities? With Eliza coming back in the next episode, what advice or counsel will she give to a struggling Kara? That's about it. My next episode for this podcast series will be an episode 3 teaser breakdown, and then I'll break down the hallucinations as well. I know I got some requests for doing reactions, but I actually really dislike being on camera, and on top of that, I want this to be kind of neutral. And it's hard to filter my reactions and remain neutral on top of that, because I do have characters I like and dislike as well as ships. Maybe it's something I'll reconsider down the line, but for now, I'm strictly going to focus on reviews, theories, and analyses. Thank you guys for listening again. I'm loving all the positive encouragement and constructive criticism. You're all lovely people. Thank you so much for supporting me.